So we wanted to bring you a debate that unfolded online between two very prominent progressives and friends of show, Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski. So Cenk tweeted this out. This sort of started the conversation. Joe Biden has 1,000 problems. I'll fight like hell to move him toward progressive positions. I'm almost certainly help to primary him in 2024, but not voting is still taking action. It doesn't make you morally superior to those who make hard choices. It might do the opposite. So that morally superior part seemed to really bother Kyle. I can understand. It also really bothers me. And Kyle responded with this. Wait, so I might be morally inferior for not picking one of the two corrupt war criminals? Am I reading this right? To which Cenk responded, yes, you are reading that right. George Bush and Adolf Hitler are both war criminals. Are you saying that not voting for either an election between the two is the morally correct position? Because it most definitely isn't. Come on the show and let's have a real discussion on it. Now, okay. I wanted to cover this because, first of all, there are people that obviously watchers of this show know very well. But I also think that this is like a debate that is illustrative of a broader dynamic where Kyle, and by the way, he did a full response video on his channel that you should check out. That's well done. Talks about how, look, he's not pretending like, and I'm not pretending like, our position is morally superior. We're not looking to shame people who, like, if you have made your own calculation, you think the right thing is to vote for Joe Biden, like, good, go do that. I'm not going to shame you or pretend that I'm morally superior for it, but grant us that same benefit of the doubt that we have our own reasons for contemplating not voting for Joe.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. And it does seem a bit counter sometimes to what Cenk is, and puts on his show and values. I think what Kyle was getting at, I watched a little bit of his response video today, was about, it was the moral inferiority and moral superiority complex, because a core theme of the way that you and I approach politics is that you can never shame people for holding the positions that they have, which is that you have to understand the motivation through which that occurs, to how they will govern themselves electorally and behave, and that not voting is an absolutely strategic choice that millions of people make every single year because they no longer believe in the political system itself and its ability in order to deliver for you. I actually don't agree with that. And look, I think that people should vote. And I think that generally on the voting front, that government has a lot to do with your life, whether you like it or not. And so that at times it does become necessary to make a lesser of two evils choice and all of that. However, I would never shame somebody for holding that position because I completely understand where the motivation of that comes from. And ultimately it comes down to values, which is that what it is that Cenk and Kyle have a differing value set. Now, shaming people for having different value sets is never a way in order to bring people over to your side. It always has to be, I need to understand where you are coming from. And then I need to make a case in order to convince you. So if I was Cenk, what I would do, and I've seen many of these vote blue no matter who, or even the Joe Biden, I'm progressive, but I'm voting for Joe Biden. They say, hey, look, yes, it's terrible. Yes, all this. But we need to make sure that RBG is replaced on the Supreme Court
the
with
courts,
somebody. And that
climate change.
That is true. That's actually true.
Legit argument.
Like I said, that's how I come at it from the right. I'm like, look, I don't like a lot of the things that some of this party does, but I'm like, hey, there are legitimate concerns and issues that I have that I hold very dear and that I want to see the country govern forward, and which some of these people agree on. And at the end of the day, yeah, I know that these other people have declared war on some of the things that I hold dear. And so you're going to have to defend that. I think that's a fine and legitimate way, but he's not coming at it that way. He's coming at it on the moral superiority.
Right.
And that's the problem.
It's counterproductive, is kind of your point, is like, even if that is your view, that you're morally superior, like being like, I'm morally superior and you're morally inferior, is probably not going to win people over. Yeah. There was another point that Kyle made that I thought was really interesting, though, which is basically that, he feels that if he votes for either Biden or Trump, like whoever he votes for, that he has some moral culpability in whatever actions they take in office. And I think, someone like Cenk or someone with that viewpoint sees that in terms of, if you vote for Trump, you are somewhat morally culpable for his actions. Right. But they don't necessarily apply that same logic in the other direction. If you vote for Joe Biden, are you also then morally culpable for some of his actions in office? And that piece is never there. It's like, well, if you vote for what they view as the lesser of two evils, and I view let me be clear. I view Joe Biden also as the lesser of two evils. I think I'm not trying to create a false equivalency here. But basically, if you vote for the lesser of two evils, then you're sort of off the hook for whatever bad stuff they do in office. And there's every reason to believe Joe Biden, based on his record, is going to do a lot of things that I personally find morally unconscionable. So where does that leave you? I guess my bottom line with all of this is I don't want to pretend like there are any good choices to make here if you're on the left. There are no good choices, right? Everyone's going to have to figure out for themselves, for their value set, what they think is the least bad choice, right? Which choice do you hate the least?
Yep.
That's what you're going to have to figure out. What can you live with? What, weighs the least heavily on your conscience? And I'm fine with however you conduct that process and whatever decision that you come to, but don't try to shame other people who are just trying to come at this with perhaps a slightly different frame, perspective, different issues that they prioritize than you do, because it's not fair, especially in a situation where, Kyle and Cenk know each other really well. They're friends. So to have your friend be like, you're morally inferior is kind of an extra layer there.
It is. And again, I think is that if you look at it and you're like, people who vote for Trump are culpable in all of his actions. Okay. Does that mean that by voting for Joe Biden that you are culpable or you support his position on the Iraq War, which killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians and thousands of American soldiers? That seems, under that framework, are you morally inferior for accepting that position? I think that's a ludicrous argument because, again, let's say, there are people in this country who vote on only gun rights. And you know what? If you are anti-gun rights and you want to take everybody's gun away, you probably should vote for Joe Biden. That is, it's existential. You're like, hey, if Trump wins, then we're probably going to have secured gun rights, something that I think is great for the rest of for a long time because of the court system. And if you're against it, then you should vote for Joe. Does that mean you co-sign his position on the Iraq War? No, not whatsoever. That's a completely fine way to vote. The whole point is that the way people vote is complicated. You have to meet people where they are. And shaming them for a morally inferior or superior position, you get down these philosophical rabbit holes like the one I just laid out on Iraq very quickly. So just don't do it.
Well, and here's the other piece is when you train your energy at the people who aren't making the decision you want them to make, then you're letting off the hook the politicians. So we saw this dynamic play out with Joe Biden's "then you ain't black" comments to Charlamagne the God.
Yes.
There was so much anger and energy. There was some anger at Joe Biden, but there was almost more anger at the people who were like, that's messed up, and no, my vote isn't free. Right? So why should the hostility be directed at the voters who are demanding that you do better for their community than at the politician who is failing to meet that standard? That's to me where the energy should be directed. And, I know Cenk will absolutely do whatever he can to push Joe Biden to the left if he does become president. I will do the same, although I have maybe less optimism that that's a realistic approach given his long track record and the fact that he's probably going to pick Amy Klobuchar as his VP. We know where this is going, right? So I don't delude myself into thinking that that's really going to work. But you also, right now is the time when you can push people and get them to expand their positions and commit to things that then maybe they have to deliver on, maybe once they're in the presidency. Look, honestly, the task forces that the left got with AOC and other leaders on are completely pathetic. But the fact that the only reason that the left even got that kind of lip service that will push him at all on anything is because you have some people who are holdouts.
Yeah.
Because you can look at the polling and see that there's a lot of young people who are like, maybe third party. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not on board. Joe has a very low approval rating with young voters and is not doing very well with Latino voters versus where other Democratic politicians have been. The fact that they are willing to consider voting a different direction is the only reason that they're even paying lip service or considering doing anything for the left. Now is when you have power.
Yeah, now is when you have power. Now is the time in order to extract leverage. People seem to understand that it's not a morally inferior or superior position. And that framework I just find really problematic in terms of the way that you have to approach not just your friends, but approach all voters. So extend charity to people and they'll give you some back.
Well said. More rising for you after this.